Ingmar Bergman is one of the foremost names in the history of world cinema. He was the only Scandinavian director since the silent era to make a major breakthrough in the United States. His films won countless awards, including 3 Academy Awards for Best Foreign Language Film. Bergman's importance stems from the extremely personal quality of his movie-making. His films are shot through with a passionate understanding of human feelings and aspirations. Much of the inner tension in Bergman's world originates in his youth. Here is young Ingmar, in sailor's outfit, attending primary school in Stockholm. He was the second son of a Protestant pastor in Sweden. His father was strict, yet also weak. His mother was a dominant, self-willed woman. Open quarrels in the Bergman household were rare, but small sins like bedwetting were punished in humiliating ways. Young Ingmar also reacted against the stern religious rhythm of his youth. Bergman attended the University of Stockholm, studying literature and the history of art. He didn't complete the courses for a degree, preferring to concentrate on student theatre activities, and at the same time breaking with his home life, and it would be years before he was reconciled with his parents. After making his mark on the Stockholm theatre scene, Bergman was spotted by Sweden's biggest movie company, Svensk Film Industry, and put to work in the script department. At the age of 25, he scored a breakthrough when his original screenplay, Torment, was directed by veteran Alf Sjöberg in 1944. The film caught the mood of angst and guilt felt by many Swedes during the war, when their country maintained a precarious neutrality. Alf Sjöberg, as the victim of a sadistic schoolmaster, was popular with young audiences of the day. And many of the actors and actresses in Torment went on to become stars in the Swedish cinema. Maj Zetterling, seen here with Sjöberg, would be recruited by the rank organization as a result of her success in Torment. The acclaim for Torment enabled Bergman to press for an assignment as writer-director. Like many of Bergman's apprentice works of the 1940s, Crisis revolves around the cynicism of a new generation when confronted with an aging and intolerant world. Stig Olin had the lead in Crisis and played Bergman's alter ego during this period as the rebellious young bohemian. Inga Landgren, also pictured, would appear in various Bergman movies and played the knight's wife in The Seventh Seal. Another favourite Bergman actor during the 1940s and early 50s was Birger Malmsten, who starred with Barbro Kohlberg in It Rains on Our Love in 1946. The film focused on a young couple trying to escape from a hostile and callous society. Birger Malmsten also starred in Ship Bound for India, 1947, with Gertrud Fried. The lovers this time are in the shadow of a baleful father figure, a ship's captain, and they dream of getting away to distant lands. Bergman was making these films in the summer and pressing on with his theatre activities during the fall and winter of each year. Bergman's use of mirrors appears in this still from Port of Call, 1948, starring Nina Christine Jönsson. He would continue to use the mirror as a means of revealing a person's anguish or self-loathing, all the way from Summer Interlude in 1950 through Fanny and Alexander. The word scrawled on the glass here means lonely, a symbol of Bergman's feelings of isolation at this time. Port of Call was also his most naturalistic film to date, taking place in and around Gothenburg harbour. This still, showing once again the deployment of mirrors, comes from the 1949 production Thirst, also known as Three Strange Loves, which is based on some short stories by Birgit Tengroth, who also acted in the film. In 1950, Bergman directed Summer Interlude, a tragic love story that he maintains was based on his first great infatuation during the 1930s. Summer Interlude was photographed by Gunnar Fischer, who would be a loyal member of Bergman's crew for more than a decade. Birger Malmsten and Maj-Britt Nilsson starred in the same movie, relishing the freedom of a few weeks on an island outside Stockholm, where so many Swedes escaped for their vacation, and where Bergman as a boy would go with his parents to the family villa. Much of Summer Interlude takes place against the background of the Royal Ballet in Stockholm. These stills demonstrate how subtly Bergman employs mirrors in a cramped setting. The characters appear to be facing the same direction, and yet they appear utterly disconnected with one another. The mirror forces a Bergman character to confront his or her true personality. The mirror never lies in such a dramatic context. And in this scene, in the dressing room of the Royal Ballet, Marie, played by Maj-Britt Nielsen, talks with the ballet master, who is dressed up for his part in Coppelia. And he, as so often in Bergman, plays the kind of inquisitor, the person who forces another to contemplate their real situation. And what Bergman does in this narrow space is quite miraculous. He uses mirrors in a way to force Marie to look at herself and to confront the past. The irony is, of course, that he, the ballet master, has his makeup on and can keep it, whereas Marie, in order to come to terms with her own past, has to remove hers. And he says to her, you can't take it off and you can't leave it on either. Bergman was very much at home in these dressing room scenes because that was his daily life at that time. He virtually lived at the theatre, and Harriet Andersson, who lived with him 2 or 3 years later in Malmö, said that he would stay at the theatre until 10 o'clock every night, and then they would just spend a few hours in their small apartment. You know, the stage was everything, and I think he felt at ease with theatre people, and you can almost smell the grease paint. And the close-ups here remind us of the theme of the mask in Bergman's work, the idea that every one of us carries a mask around, and beneath it is this quivering true self, which only in a crisis becomes discernible.
Man vill vara lycklig, va?
Waiting Women, also known as Secrets of Women, was made in part on location in Paris and mostly in the studios during 1952. The director's uncanny control of composition within the frame is clear from the next photo of Birger Malmsten and Maj-Britt Nielsen in Waiting Women. The male would-be artist and his female companion continue to haunt Bergman's cinema. Unexpectedly, in the concluding episode of Waiting Women, Bergman revealed a flair for comedy that nobody knew he could bring to his movies. He was approaching his mid-30s, and he found in Eva Dahlbeck and Gunnar Björnstrand the ideal purveyors of sophisticated banter. He would develop the comedic skills of these two actors in his subsequent films A Lesson in Love and Smiles of a Summer Night. Bergman's first relationship with a screen actress was with Harriet Andersson, with whom he fell in love during the early 50s. She plays the title role in Monica, shot entirely on location in the islands off Stockholm and released in 1953. It's perhaps the most unpretentious of Bergman's movies and revolves, like so many of his early works, around the concept of summer as a fleeting season of passion and pleasure. Lars Ekborg plays Monica's lover. In 1953, Bergman also made one of his most powerful films, Sawdust and Tinsel. Bergman was much influenced by the German expressionist cinema of the 20s and also by Eisenstein's principles of montage. The film climaxes with a tense moment when the circus owner tries to commit suicide while a terrified clown looks on. Bergman capitalized on his newfound comedy talent in A Lesson in Love in 1954. It featured Gunnar Björnstrand and Eva Dahlbeck for the second time, he the pompous, if also sly, husband, and she the urbane, sophisticated woman of the world. Dreams, made in 1955, was one of Bergman's most curious productions. Telling two stories side by side, its profound melancholy seemed to stem from a conviction that marriage and sexual relationships were both doomed to failure. In 1956, Bergman won the first of his major awards, this one at the Cannes Film Festival, for Smiles of a Summer Night, a dazzling, succulent comedy of manners set in turn-of-the-century Sweden. It was made in the summer of 1955 with numerous actors and actresses from the theatre where Bergman was working in Malmö. What could be more romantic than shooting a movie with death at your side? Bergman made The Seventh Seal in 1956, and it would become his single most influential work. Note the old-fashioned but still reliable Mitchell camera, with which cinematographer Gunnar achieved such wonderfully vivid imagery. Soon, however, he would opt for a more naturalistic kind of cinematography. Here the director talks to Inga Landgren, playing the knight's wife in The Seventh Seal. Everyone who worked with Bergman mentions his extraordinary ability to make every player feel that he or she is a crucial factor in the success of a movie. On the other hand, he never dictated specific approaches to a part. He simply offered some clue to the character which the actor could develop. B.B. Anderson, pictured as the innocent young Mia in The Seventh Seal, had a relationship with Bergman during the mid and late 1950s. Bergman found in her the warmth and understanding he idolized in women on screen. After The Seventh Seal, Bergman turned to the dilemma of old age in Wild Strawberries, made in 1957. He describes a distinguished professor's days of reckoning, and the old man was played by none other than Victor Sjöström, the key figure of the Swedish silent cinema, and a great director at MGM in the 20s, under the name of Victor Seaström, with movies like He Who Gets Slapped and The Wind. Throughout the 50s, Bergman used dreams and dream sequences in his films. He even used them as the title of a couple of his films. Here, for example, the old professor imagines himself in the Gamla Stan, the old town of Stockholm, and he starts seeing things which unnerve him. First of all, the clock with no hands, the idea of time being frozen, and of course an indication of death. Then this blinding light. Bergman's always hated hot sunlight. For him, this is a very uncomfortable moment, and he wants the professor to feel that way too. Then the boarded-up windows, which suggest the isolation that this rather benign but actually rather selfish old professor finds himself in. Everything has a sinister feel and look to it, very strongly influenced by the German silent cinema. Bergman also loved to use the shock cut. In The Seventh Seal, as I've said in the commentary, there is this wonderful shock cut when the monk is found on the shore, dead. And it's the same here when the empty bladder-like figure of this man is turned around by Isak Borg. And the use of sound is very good in this sequence. Sjöström is seen on location with Bergman and with Bergman's eldest daughter, Lena, who played a small role in the movie. Sjöström was in his mid-70s when playing Isak Borg in Wild Strawberries, and he died only a couple of years after it was completed. Wild Strawberries introduced another of Bergman's great actresses, Ingrid Thulin, who plays the sympathetic, if down-to-earth, daughter-in-law of Isak Borg. The mood on a Bergman shoot was invariably cheerful. The crew involved only about a dozen technicians at one time. Gösta Ekman was an assistant director on Wild Strawberries and later became one of Sweden's favourite movie comedians. Bergman's daughter Lena and Victor Sjöström are at right in this informal shot with Ekman. Another familiar face is that of Gunnar Björnstrand, who played Isak Borg's cold-hearted son in Wild Strawberries. Björnstrand appeared in more than a dozen Bergman movies, including The Seventh Seal and Fanny and Alexander, prior to his death in 1986. Many of Bergman's early films were shot in the archipelago outside Stockholm, before he moved to the island of Fårö. Here he is ruminating on a scene to be shot for Wild Strawberries. Ingrid Thulin and B.B. Andersson starred in Brink of Life, a stark depiction of women in a hospital's maternity ward, which was released in 1958. Eva Dahlbeck also figured prominently in this tense and economic statement on the mystery of life and death. The screenplay was by Bergman and Ulla Isaksson, from her own short story, and she would also contribute the screenplay of The Virgin Spring the following year. Here is Bibi Andersson with the ward sister, played by Barbro Hjert af Örnesch. Bergman directed The Magician in 1958. The Virgin Spring, which won Bergman an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film of 1960, was shot in the province of Dalarna, in the central region of Sweden, north of Stockholm. Dalarna is the source of many legends, as well as a vivid peasant culture. Like The Seventh Seal, this film evokes the everyday life of the Middle Ages with effortless skill. Karin, played by Birgitta Pettersson, takes candles to the church, but 3 men rape and rob her as she travels through the forest. This was the first of Bergman's films wholly shot by cameraman Sven Nykvist. They would work together for 4 decades, arriving at a mutual understanding that was almost instinctive. Karin's father, played by Max von Sydow, realizes what has happened, uproots a birch tree, cleanses himself, and exacts vengeance. Finally, he vows to build a church in atonement for his negligence, on the spot where his daughter has been killed. The religious element remains in the foreground of Bergman's work at this stage. In the wake of his more demanding movies, Bergman often relaxed with a comedy. Stig Jarl and Jarl Kulle featured in The Devil's Eye in 1960, which marked the end of a phase in the director's career. The 1960s ushered in a new style and approach in the director's life. Married to concert pianist K.B. Larate, Bergman achieved a fresh simplicity of tone and image in films like Through a Glass Darkly, with Harriet Andersson and Lars Persgaard, Winter Light, and The Silence. Through a Glass Darkly, 1961, also won an Academy Award, and was the first production to be shot by Bergman on his beloved island of Fårö in the Baltic. The problems of religion in the atomic age are brought into sharp, relentless focus in Winter Light. The film deals with a pastor's inability to cope with his self-doubt and emotional uncertainty. Gunnar Björnstrand plays the lead. Since his very first films, Bergman had wrestled with the dilemmas of religious belief, and The Seventh Seal, The Virgin Spring, and now Winter Light hinged on this issue. Even in his final work, Saraband, the concept of faith and religious imagery continued to haunt Bergman. By now, Sven Nykvist was firmly established as Bergman's principal technical collaborator. His skillful lighting is emphasized by the light throwing through the window, in what is in fact a studio shot. In The Silence, released in 1963, Gunnel Lindblom's uptight sister is played by Ingrid Thulin. The Silence was a big box office success, with 4 million people going to see it in Germany alone, although this was all on account of a single brief scene showing a couple making out in a cabaret. Children didn't feature much in Bergman's early films, but gradually they assume greater importance, climaxing in Fanny and Alexander. Bergman was always intrigued by the idea of people being deracinated, taken up from their regular surroundings and put somewhere where they're completely at a loss. The small boy here, in The Silence, played by Jürgen Lindström, who would appear in Persona 2, seems to represent for Bergman the discovery of the world, the discovery of the unfamiliar. And this boy will gradually, during the film, be changed. He will gradually mature until at the end of the film he is the only sensible person left. And I think Bergman identifies in a way with him and probably remembers a little bit being like that when he was young. And indeed, there's a shot here where you hear the chinking of the chandelier that the man is mending, and at the beginning of Fanny and Alexander, in his aunt's apartment in Uppsala, Bergman has young Alexander watching the chandelier in exactly the same way. There are also nice little sexual references in this film that are very discreet. The boy has, of course, a gun which he fires at the man. He pees on the carpet elsewhere in the sequence. And then after rushing through the labyrinthine corridors, he'll come face to face with a Rubens-like painting which shows two people making love. The old waiter in this sequence is actually a very, very beneficent character, someone who saves the life of Ingrid Thulin, who plays Jürgen Lindström's aunt in the film. He can't communicate with language, but he can with music, and he plays the music of Bach to Ingrid Thulin. Last year in Marienbad had appeared a year before Bergman shot this. I can't help feeling that he'd seen the film and used these long corridors in much the same way as René did. Once again, after a sombre movie like The Silence, came the antic, if rather heavy-handed joy of a Bergman comedy, All These Women, made in 1964, with Bibi Andersson and Jarl Kuller cavorting to the strains of Yes, We Have No Bananas. In 1965, Bergman made his first film with Norwegian actress Liv Ullmann, and for the next few years would share his life with her on the island of Fårö, perched above Gotland off the southeastern coast of Sweden, and this is where Persona was shot. This most complex of all Bergman's films develops from the uncanny resemblance between two women, played by Liv Ullmann and Bibi Andersson. Bibi Andersson as the nurse has probably never excelled her performance in Persona, shifting from a smiling belief in human goodness to a fierce defense of her own sanity. Throughout his career, Bergman developed the close-up to startling effect, suggesting the mask-like texture and significance of the human face. Gertrud Fried and Max von Sydow starred in Hour of the Wolf in 1968. Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann made a suite of 3 successful films with Bergman on the island of Fårö: Hour of the Wolf, Shame, and The Passion of Anna. We see them at the end of Shame, overwhelmed by a war situation. The reverberations of Vietnam are felt strongly in this movie, which aroused controversy in Sweden. It was one of the few occasions when Bergman commented overtly on a contemporary world issue. Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann starred in The Passion of Anna in 1969, a bizarre, disturbing film on the nature of guilt and sexual possession. Von Sydow plays the haunted, defensive fugitive from society, and Liv Ullmann his beautiful but lethal partner. Also in 1969, Bergman made The Ritual for Swedish television, confirming his facility for working within the confines of the small screen. All the emphasis is on the human faces. The backgrounds are grey and neutral. Hollywood often attempted to get Bergman to make a movie in the States, but like Fellini, he always refused. In 1970, though, he made The Touch in English, with Elliot Gould starring alongside Bibi Andersson for ABC Pictures Corporation, providing the film could be shot and edited in his native Sweden. In Cries and Whispers, 1972, Liv Ullmann and Ingrid Thulin play discordant sisters, and they're in mourning for their other sister, Harriet Andersson, who is dying. Sven Nykvist won an Academy Award for his cinematography on this harrowing film. Relationships between women played a significant role in Bergman's spectrum. He had a unique gift for understanding the female psyche, and was indeed much more relaxed in female company than he ever was with men. During the 1970s, Bergman worked increasingly in television. Liv Ullmann and Erland Josephson were reunited in Scenes from a Marriage in 1973, which scored high ratings wherever it was shown. This film proved that Bergman could analyze the pressures of a contemporary marriage as brilliantly as he could handle relationships in earlier periods. This clip from the 6th and final episode of Scenes from a Marriage exhibits Bergman's technique on television. He knew immediately, almost instinctively, the limitations of the small screen and exploited them to his advantage. Bergman is quite content to hold the camera and let them talk to each other without a lot of intercutting, without a lot of redundant close-ups. And he does this quite frequently. As he got older, he took more risks. So, for example, in Winter Light, Ingrid Thulin reads a letter for about 6 minutes into camera, and Liv Ullmann talks into camera in Hour of the Wolf for a long time. So he was more relaxed in 1973. He knew that he'd achieved everything in the cinema, and now he wanted to tackle, I think, the challenge of television and to reach an altogether new audience, which he did. There's also a wonderful relationship between Erland Josephson and Liv Ullmann. They'd been in so many films together, and they would come back together in Bergman's final work, Saraband. They knew each other extremely well. Another triumph, both on television and in theatrical release, was Bergman's version of Mozart's scintillating opera The Magic Flute in 1975. He wisely did not try to open out the opera, but relied on traditional stage virtues. Swedish baritone Håkan Hagegård played the part of Papageno. Erland Josephson and Liv Ullmann, partners in Scenes from a Marriage, were reunited in Face to Face in 1976, which analysed the mental breakdown of a successful woman psychiatrist. While rehearsing at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in January 1976, Bergman was arrested on charges of tax evasion. He would be exonerated later, but the shock and the humiliation stung him into leaving his native Sweden, and he settled in Munich. There he was appointed a director at the Residenztheater, and there he made The Serpent's Egg in 1977, a film produced by Dino De Laurentiis and redolent of Bergman's anguish and frustration at the time. The Serpent's Egg recreated the panic and decadence of Berlin in 1923, but few Bergman admirers liked it, and the English dialogue sounded gauche. David Carradine and Gert Frobe starred alongside Liv Ullmann. The most poignant partnership of the period was that of the two Bergmans, Ingmar and Ingrid, on Autumn Sonata in 1978. The film described a protracted clash between a brilliant concert pianist and her introverted daughter, played by Liv Ullmann. Shot in Norway, Autumn Sonata underlined the price of fame when it comes at the expense of family ties. Living in Munich at the close of the 1970s and working for the Residenztheater there, Bergman made a broody, unnerving film in black and white called From the Life of the Marionettes, which was released in 1980. But among its benefits was an impressive performance by German stage actress Christina Buchegger. Robert Atzorn and Christina Buchegger act out a long night of recrimination in From the Life of the Marionettes. The composition, even the theme, might well have come from a Bergman movie of the late 1940s. By this stage, Sven Nykvist had become much more than a mere technician on Bergman's team. He and the director would plan and discuss each shot and rarely disagreed on artistic points. In 1981, Bergman at last returned to Sweden. There he made his screen swan song, Fanny and Alexander, about the impact of a father's death on his two young children, played by Bertil Guver and Pernilla Alwyn. Fanny and Alexander was recognized, I think, around the world as a kind of summing up for Bergman, in which many of his familiar themes were recycled, and, of course, we saw many of the familiar actors doing their turn. It was a wonderful, wonderful ensemble piece with a very warm feel to it, much more so than any other Bergman film. This prologue to the television version of Fanny and Alexander must have come straight from Bergman's childhood, because, like the impressionable Alexander here, he used to visit his aunt's apartment in Uppsala. And the young Alexander is so impressionable that he sees things which, of course, couldn't possibly happen, but because, like Bergman himself, he is a fantasist and exists in this fantasy world, he is able to see these things. Bertil Guver was just on 12 when he made this film, and role to do. It was a shoot that lasted much, much longer than most Bergman films. And here's a nice self-referential jibe at Bergman's Seventh Seal, where he shows death lurking in the shadows. This long, often affectionate salute to Bergman's vanished youth brought 4 Academy Awards to the Swedish film industry in the spring of 1984, including Bergman's 3rd Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film. It was released in both theatrical and television versions. Bergman declared that Fanny and Alexander would be his last film for the cinema, a promise he actually adhered to, although he would direct TV movies and plays for a further 18 years. During the late 1980s and 1990s, an aging Bergman concentrated on staging plays at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm and directing TV plays such as After the Rehearsal in 1984, The Blessed Ones in 1986, The Last Gasp in 1995, In the Presence of a Clown in 1997, and The Image Makers in 2000. He also continued to write original screenplays, among them The Best Intentions, directed by Billy August, and Sunday's Children, directed by Bergman's youngest son, Daniel, the following year. These films were inspired by characters and incidents from Bergman's own family, in particular his parents. Another original script drawn from a novel by Bergman was entitled Private Confessions. It was brought to the screen under the direction of Liv Ullmann in 1996 and evoked an incident in the life of Bergman's mother, when she confided to the family pastor that she had been unfaithful to her husband. In May 1997, Bergman was awarded the prestigious Palm of Palms on the occasion of the 50th Cannes Film Festival, an award accepted by his daughter Linn Ullmann, as the director himself no longer wished to travel beyond Sweden. Liv Ullmann directed one of Bergman's final screenplays, Faithless, in 2000, and it revisited many of his familiar themes, such as infidelity in marriage and the friction between art and daily life. The TV production Saraband brought Bergman's career to a serene, if sometimes unnerving, close in 2003. This meditation on old age and the transcendent power of music starred Liv Ullmann and Erland Josephson in a kind of sequel to Scenes from a Marriage. One feels that Bergman, like Liv Ullmann, was alone at the end, but somehow reassured and serene about encroaching death. Ingmar Bergman died of natural causes on his beloved island of Fårö on July 30, 2007, at the age of 89.